There are several returners that need to ball out this spring practice, but at the end of the day, it all comes down to one guy. Nico Iamaleava has got to have a great spring. All that and more. It's your Thursday Locked On Vols.
You are Locked On Vols, your daily podcast on the Tennessee Volunteers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome into it. This is Locked On Vols, and I'm your host, Derek Kane. Appreciate you for being here and making Locked On Vols your first listen, your first watch each and every single day. We're a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every single day, everydayers. Appreciate you for being here, and appreciate Nissan for being a part of today's show. All new 2025 Nissan Armada. Stay with us for the Armada Team of the Week later in the episode. That is coming up here today on a Thursday Locked On Vols. Spring practice primer. It starts on Friday morning. We talked top 5 newcomers yesterday. We're talking top 5 returners today. And really, we can make it a top 1 returner because it is all about Nico Iamaleava. Austin Price going to join me in segment number 2 to talk Rickey Gibson in spring practice. Spencer McLaughlin going to join me in segment number 3 to talk big picture stuff. College football and Tennessee quarterback Nico Iamaleava. Of course, Spencer is from Locked On College Football. But all that's coming up on today's show. But let's go ahead and start with my top 5 returners that need to have big-time springs for the University of Tennessee. All this revolves around Nico, and I'll save him towards the end. But, there are big pieces of this team that need to step up, elevate their game, help those around them, elevate those around them. And here are the 5 players that I can think of in terms of returners on the offensive side of the football. The first name that just jumped out at me outside of Nico, number 1, was Lance Hurd. Lance Hurd was pretty bad at points and times last year. He also improved, and he also did a lot of good things last year. But, we, myself included, often just like to focus on the negative. And for a good portion of a stretch, if you will, he wasn't playing good football, and he was out of shape and was playing hurt, and, points in times it just wasn't good. But Lance Hurd, we need this spring for him to dial it back to the guy that he was when he entered LSU. Number 1 overall prospect in the class, signed by the Tigers in 2023. Former 5-star rated prospect. Tennessee needs him to be that guy, because he's not been that guy at Tennessee yet. So, take spring practice seriously, get after it, assert your domination on the offensive line for an offensive line that lost 4 starters and you're the only one back. Lance Hurd needs to be that dude this spring. He is the first person that came to mind, and he also needs to be on the practice field, okay? Missed a lot of practice last spring and over fall camp. He needs to be on the practice field for sure. Number 2 is Chris Brazzell. Same situation, right? Except he didn't come from an SEC school. He came from Tulane, so group of 5. And there's obviously a jump there in the level of competition and all that. But he had 7-8 touchdowns as a freshman at Tulane, had over 800 yards. I mean, was a playmaker, came to Tennessee, played a ton. It just didn't translate last year. He had a case of the drop skis, points and times wasn't running right routes, all that and more. I mean, I'm not a wide receiver coach. I'm not pretending to be, but he wasn't where he needed to be last year. But for a group that's lost 7 wide receivers, 6 on scholarship, all these starters, he's going to have to step up. He's going to have to make some plays. And you hope, and I'll continue to reference this, and I'm not saying this will happen, but look at the jump that Dante Thornton made second year in the system. Really, he was starting to come around there towards the end of his first season in Knoxville, where Chris Brazzell never really did. Once they moved Dante Thornton back to the outside, he went off in games against Kentucky, caught his first touchdown, or caught the only touchdown of the Missouri game that year on the road on the play that he got hurt on. He was starting to come around there towards the end, but he took off his second year in the system, albeit he was injured a lot and didn't play nearly as many snaps as Tennessee needed him to. So can Chris Brazzell take that step as a second-year receiver in the system? You hope so, because Tennessee absolutely has got to have it. Number 3 is Jordan Ross. You are losing James Pierce. Okay, we know Tennessee plays multiple Leos. We know Tennessee plays multiple guys on the defensive line. It is a rotation with Rodney Gardner. He, rotates anywhere from 10 to 12 guys. In that rotation, he plays 3 Leos. So Jordan Ross, the former 5-star, was the 4th Leo last year, primarily just played special teams. He will now move up 1 spot behind, of course, Elijah Herring. No, he's not here anymore. He hasn't been here in 2 years. He will move up behind Joshua Josephs and Caleb Herring and then it'll be Jordan Ross. Now, can he take a step? What we love about the Leos here is you can play multiple Leos at one time, especially in pass rushing situations. So just because you're the third Leo on the depth chart doesn't mean you're not going to get a whole lot of run. You can get anywhere from maybe 10 to 15 snaps a game potentially. But even, can Jordan Ross overtake one of those guys? I don't know. His physical attributes are through the roof. I mean, he is very talented. He is built very well. He's been now a year, almost a year. He was a summer enrollee in the strength and conditioning program here at Tennessee. How big of a step can you take? Because the sky is the limit for a guy like Jordan Ross that needs to be another weapon up front on the defensive line for Tennessee. James Pierce is left, sure, stats-wise a little bit down from 23 to 24, but pressures were up. Sack numbers were still good, okay? But you are losing a guy that was one of the best pass rushers in the entire country. You need to help him pull your weight in replacing that, and I think Jordan Ross certainly can. So he needs to have a big spring. Number 4, give me Jeremiah Thielander, okay? And maybe I could swap out Jeremiah Thielander's name for Edwin Spillman, because Edwin Spillman certainly is going to be in the plans for Tennessee moving forward. Edwin Spillman is a guy that missed so much time last year with injury, but still played when healthy. I mean, they have big plans. William Inge has big plans for Edwin Spillman, no doubt. And so maybe being healthy, going through spring and actually getting repetitions and all that is going to be massive for him to have a true spring. Because remember last year, he got here on the third day of spring practice and he was thrown into the mix, and it was very hectic for him. And then he dealt with all those injuries in the fall, and he never had a true look at what a season was for him. So take advantage of this spring for Edwin Spillman. But my guy here is Jeremiah Thielander. And Jeremiah Thielander is a guy that has played a whole lot of football for you. I think that he's got a little bit of limitations outside the tackle box, and that's fair. A lot of linebackers do. But I think he's a good player. I think he's a good leader. But I still think that there's some steps that he can take to elevate his game. He and Arian Carter over-pursued a lot last year and opened up lanes underneath for cutbacks and all that. Tackling, running inside and out. We call it running the alley, right? Running the alley, going down the line of scrimmage, and then making that tackle inside out or flushing it out. And, I think he can improve in that regard. But nonetheless, I think Jeremiah Thielander is a really, really good talent. He's going to be out there. Arian Carter is going to be a bit banged up this spring. So the linebacker group is Jeremiah Thielander's for sure this spring. And so, from a leadership standpoint, from a play on the field standpoint, elevate your game, bring some of those freshmen along and guys like Edwin Spillman, and let's see what you got. Finally, and again, we can throw out these other 5 names, and really just focus on this one, because at the end of the day, this is the one that matters. Sure, there's no I in team, right? But you've got to have a good quarterback to win football games and to win a national championship, okay? Just point blank, right? And you have to have an efficient quarterback that, at minimum, an efficient quarterback that knows when to step up and go make plays. But Nico's more than that. I think he's got the potential to be one of the best quarterbacks in the country. As I will speak with Spencer here later in the show, there is a step there. And so, we talked about on the show before, there is a step there. Nico, who wasn't horribly as bad as anybody wants to make it out to be from a national landscape or from opposing SEC fan bases. He was not that bad last year, nor was he what everybody envisioned from a number 1 overall player in the country and a 5-star. He was kind of right in the middle, right? He was a first-year starting quarterback that led his team to the college football playoff. Not everybody can say that. But there's another level there, for sure. Consistency, down-the-field passing, processing information quickly, using your legs, escapability. I wish Tennessee would call some more design runs for him. There is another level, maybe even 2, to that of Nico Iamaleava, and that's fine. Young quarterbacks get reps, get repetitions. You hope they get there. And I think Nico can certainly get there. So he has got to have a big spring. I want to be hearing about how everything's coming easy and natural to him, and he's leading, and he's making these he's always making these wild throws, but the consistency. I want to hear that Nico's had an amazing spring. That way that he can be well on his way to taking that step next fall, and then maybe overcompensating for some questions you have at receiver and on the offensive line. Lance Hurd, Chris Brazzell, Jordan Ross, Jeremiah Thielander, and quarterback Nico Iamaleava, my 5 returners that are most important, that have got to step up, that have got to ball out for the University of Tennessee this spring as spring practice begins on Friday. That's tomorrow. Hey, how about it? That is tomorrow. Hey, when we come back, Austin Price going to help preview the start of spring practice. And what's the latest with Tennessee cornerback Rickey Gibson? Will number 1 be on the field tomorrow morning? That's coming up next as we continue on here your Thursday Locked On Vols. Hey guys, I want to tell you about the Nissan Armada Team of the Week, brought to you by our friends again over at Nissan. All new 2025 Nissan Armada. Each week, the Locked On College basketball experts are picking one team that stands apart from top-seeded stars to the unexpected upset. These guys showcase the strength and the sheer power needed to push their team forward. This week's Armada and clear-cut Team of the Week are the Houston Cougars. I don't know if the Houston Cougars beat the Alabama Crimson Tide on a last-second shot, but whatever. Since joining the Big 12 last season, the Cougars have gone a combined 33-4 in conference games, winning the regular season title by multiple games each year. There is no team in college basketball that capably embodies the rugged Armada than Kelvin Sampson's squad. Houston's tenacious defense leads the nation in fewest points allowed per game for the second straight season, but they're not number one in Ken Palm defensively like the Tennessee Volunteers. When it comes to the Nissan Armada, they say go forth and conquer. That's exactly what the Houston Cougars have done here. So it's clear that our Team of the Week is out here ready to conquer the road ahead with some confidence, just like you can in the all-new Nissan Armada or any of the Nissan's outstanding vehicles. Take the Nissan Armada Rogue Pathfinder and go find your next big adventure. You can do it all at shopnissanusa.com. One more time, that is shopnissanusa.com. Austin, Tennessee begins spring practice here, day after tomorrow, and I think the biggest question on everybody's mind, outside of offensive line, wide receiver, DB, all that and more, is about Rickey Gibson. Is number one going to be out there on the field when we head out to practice on Friday?
Yes, I do believe he will be on the practice field. I'll be shocked if he's not. He's been going through all the winter workout conditioning stuff since Pete Nakos put out there that he may enter the portal, in the spring window. So we'll see again whether he gets to that point. I think Tennessee will have him for spring, and once spring practice gets started, and you're out there with your teammates, you're putting in work, bonds start forming, and a lot of that stuff can kind of get kind of calm down a little bit.
What would you say to fans? I mean, I think everybody to this point knows that, this is kind of part of it. This is a business, but it doesn't make it any easier, right? I think some fans are struggling with, seeing one of your starters do a public play to force the hand of your football team. But it's not just happening here. That's happening, maybe not publicly, but that's what's happening everywhere. It's just kind of where we are in this whole thing, right?
It's not ideal. It's not how I would have played it. I would have just went through spring and went to Tennessee, and said, look, I want to get this right. If not, I'm going to take a look in the portal, and, likely it gets worked out and no one ever knows, right? Instead, this plays out in a public way, and it puts Tennessee in a weird spot. And so, for fans, I get it. Fans have seen so much change in the game. Now, the on-the-field product's not suffered. It's still going great, but it's the interest from January through August that maybe is kind of waning a little bit. The interest in recruiting, when it's not official visit season or commitment season. How much interest is there right now compared to previous years when it was people followed at 365 days a year? Because everything comes back to the money, comes back to the transfer portal, and how both of those entities together have created such chaos at the college level.
On the VolQuest podcast earlier this week, you, Brent, and I gave three different answers. First thing I'm going to be looking for, offensive line. I think you said wide receivers. I think Brent said cornerbacks. Let's stay on cornerbacks real quick. McCoy, sideline for now. Gibson is going to be practicing, we believe, but kind of up in the air, right? You got McMurray, which what you have there. But then it's nothing, right? You've got some freshmen that's got to step up. Where are second-year players like Caleb Beasley, Marcus Gorey? What is Tennessee looking for at the cornerback position over the next month or so?
Well, I expect Beasley to work a lot at safety. So I think you're looking at true freshmen, whether it's Ty Redmond, Trey Poteet, Tim Merritt, Dylan Lewis. Like there's going to be, a handful of true freshmen who are going to just get thrown in the deep end this spring, Eric. And, Tennessee hopes that they can swim. And, Jalen McMurray will obviously get a ton of run. And Rickey Gibson's going to be out there. So that helps, right? Like it'd be different if Gibson wasn't going through spring. But, you also need those freshmen to get a lot of reps because you have to come out of spring going, okay, here's where McCoy is in the recovery process. Here's where the freshmen are through spring. Do we need to go get somebody? because it's possible you have to.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of that will depend on what the freshmen look like over these 15 practices starting on Friday.
I asked you this on Tuesday. I'm going to ask you again. Why would they want to work Beasley at safety where they just don't have a lot of depth at corner right now?
I think they feel like he may fit better there.
Okay.
I think he'll probably play a little bit of both, but I think that safety is probably, kind of where, I think he may end up. And I actually like him there. I really do. I think he's got great ball skills. If he can handle the physicality part of safety, I think Caleb Beasley can be a really good safety at this level.
Flip it back over to the offensive side of the football. A lot of people are going to be looking at wide receivers, Mike Matthews, Chris Brazzell, Braylon Staley, all that and more. Travis Smith, Redarius Jackson. I want to – Joakim Dotson's not here because he's not as early enrollee. I want to ask you about Amari Jefferson. Where is he in his recovery process? Going to be limited, we believe, at the beginning, but kind of how much progress is he making? And when can Tennessee fans start hearing some good reports about Amari Jefferson?
I think the him running around and doing a lot of training is going really, really well. I think Tennessee's really pleased with where he's at. I think he's got some explosiveness that maybe, they weren't sure he was going to have. I think he's done a nice job of rehabbing and rebounding from that hip surgery that he had back at the 1st of November when he was at Alabama. And so, you're right. He'll be limited early on. The question is how quickly can he become a participant when it comes to contact? And I think there's hope that he can do that post-spring break. So Tennessee will practice once on Friday, which is basically like a short walkthrough. Then they'll practice 3 times next week. And then the university has spring break. So all the kids will go do their own spring break thing. It's coming back out of that at the end of March. When he comes out of the spring break, which will be, practice number 5 for Tennessee, 5 of 15, is he able to go contact at that point? There's hope that he will be able to.
On the offensive line, you are replacing 4 starters. We know about the Tennessee got 2 transfers. Wendell Moy, he's going to play somewhere. Sam Pendleton's going to play somewhere. Where do you believe that Pendleton, who didn't play, but practiced some at center with Notre Dame, where do you think Tennessee's going to have him to begin with, center or guard?
That's a great question, and I do not know the answer to it. Obviously, there's some flexibility there. I think Wendell Moy will absolutely be a guard. Pendleton, I think it depends on, where Tennessee feels like they're at center. I think he'll work some at center, but I would probably lean guard to start. And then, if Tennessee feels like, hey, we're a little bit behind at center, we need to go with a more experienced guy, then, they slide Pendleton in the center if they feel like he can do it.
David Sanders, everybody wants to know more about him. And of course, he got his toes wet a little bit with bowl practices. I mean, from a physical, athletic traits, all that and more fundamental, like he's going to be a stud. My question about David Sanders is my question about all these true freshmen that are going to be forced into playing early, and we believe David Sanders will be. Where is he strength-wise, and where is he weight-wise? How much can David Sanders kind of overcome that early in his career? Because, again, whether he's out there snap 1, game 1, it don't matter. He's going to be out there early and play a lot as a true freshman.
Absolutely. And from strength-wise, I think David will be fine. Weight-wise, he's going to be fine. He's taking advantage of, January and February of putting on the right kind of weight, putting on muscle, and then he's uber athletic. So he's going to have every opportunity to be Tennessee's starting right tackle opposite Lance Hurd.
Last question I got for you. Not only the spring practice starting this weekend, but with that, the door's open for some recruits. 5-star wide receiver Tristan Key's going to be in the house. Your 5-star quarterback Faison Brandon's going to be here with them. Who were some other of those headliners that Tennessee should expect this first weekend?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest one would be in-state, players, Zach Groves and Craig Tutt. I think, getting them back over here this weekend is big. But you're right, Keys, because he's coming with Faison Brandon, this is a big visit for Tennessee. They've had a lot of the momentum. He has slowed things down, though. Can they keep the momentum with a big weekend this weekend?
Spencer McLaughlin, host of Locked On College Football and Locked On Oregon, still correct? I mean,
yes,
you're double dipping, making all that money. Spencer, from an outsider's perspective, from a national's perspective, Tennessee begins spring practice on Friday. what do you think about the Vols right now in terms of what you want to read about or maybe see highlights of on YouTube? What do you want to hear or see from Tennessee this spring, kind of from a national lens?
I want to see Nico Iamaleava fulfill the DJ Uiagalelei articles of years past. He's comfortable. He's focused. He's finally ready for a Heisman campaign, which is one of my favorite running jokes on Twitter of all time because we did it for about 4 seasons. But for Nico, that's, I think, the most pivotal aspect to me for Tennessee this year. Yes, you lose Dylan Sampson and a couple of wide receivers, replacing guys along the offensive line. Sure, those are all valid questions to ask. But end of the day, the Tennessee defense was great last year. And they go up against Ohio State, and you find an offense who's clicking. And Tennessee did not have the ability to go toe-to-toe with them. After a hot start early in the year, once they got into SEC play, the offense really struggled. And it was because the passing game was not consistent enough. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Eric. I think it was 6 games that Nico had under 200 yards passing, 5-6 games in that
Something
sort of
like that.
range. And that's not sustainable. Like they were carried by a great running game and a great defense last year. But now that you have, potentially some changes on that defensive side of the ball. I mean, one change in particular, no James Pierce, of course, and a big change on offense with no Dylan Sampson, and you're working in new wide receivers, you have to have your quarterback take that step forward. So what I want to see in here coming out of Knoxville is, hey, Nico looks like he is much more comfortable, like he is making quality reads, that he's making good on-target throws. And it's not as if we never saw that last year. We just didn't see it consistently. So that position to me is the one I look at and say, boy, this is where Tennessee has to be able to take a step forward if they want to get back to the playoff, because once again, it's going to be competitive. And we saw last year 9-3 doesn't get you into the playoff. And if you get to 10-2 again, yeah, you're going to be there. But I think that's the biggest question to me for Tennessee.
Yeah, I mean, that's been my biggest offseason, point for the Vols. It's, Tennessee's got a lot of questions on the offensive line at wide receiver with Rickey Gibson, Jamal McCoy at corner. I mean, there's Tennessee. I said this on yesterday's show. Josh Heupel is entering this spring practice with more questions than he's ever had outside of his first spring when he was hired, in late January and, thrown out there, a couple of weeks later. I mean, there's a ton of questions right now, but you can overcome so many of those questions if your quarterback takes a step and like we think, Nico is capable of. Now, last year, Nico certainly, needs to get better, more consistent in some areas. Boy, it was not all his fault. Those wide receivers last year were not good, simply not good. And it's up to the quarterback to make them better. I get that, but he didn't have a lot of help at points and times in that regard. So I'm with you. I think the biggest thing this offseason, Nico has got to take that step, and I think that he will because, gosh, he's got – you talk about just pure intangibles and traits. I mean, he's, top 2, top 3 in the country of quarterbacks that I want. Let me ask you this. Quarterbacks returning in the SEC or just quarterbacks power rankings right now, where you got Nico in the SEC?
Well, I would not have him number 1. I'd put Garrett Nussmeier in that slot.
I would too.
The SEC is really fun when it comes to quarterbacks this year because there aren't that many known commodities. There's Garrett Nussmeier, and I know we want to declare Lenora Sellers a known commodity. I still have a couple of questions there. I know he's a great athlete and a fantastic runner, but like Nico, can he take that next step as a passer? Or you look at Marcel Reed over at Texas A&M, or you look at Jackson Arnold at Auburn. Incredibly talented guys, but I haven't seen them put it together for an entire season. I'd have a hard time ranking my top 5 quarterbacks in the SEC and leaving Nico off because he has proven for all the questions that you and myself and many others have about him going into this year, fairly so, he still has answered more, doubts necessarily that other quarterbacks just haven't had the chance to do quite yet. Like, what do we actually know Jackson Arnold can be? Because we saw him in the bowl game in an Oklahoma uniform against Arizona 2 seasons ago, and it was, he turned the ball over too much, but hey, this is great. Look, he went for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. This is then he's getting benched halfway through the year. And I've got Oklahoma fans telling me I'm ridiculous for saying, hey, I don't think Jackson Arnold's a problem here. And what do you know? They end up hiring a new offensive coordinator, bringing a new quarterback in. And even with Oklahoma, who brought in, I thought, the best transfer portal quarterback available this cycle in John Mateer. I haven't seen him start in the SEC. I watched him play a Mountain West adjacent schedule last year and against a couple of legit teams, or bowl teams, at the Power 4 level in Texas Tech and Washington. Mateer guided the Cougars to a win. And I think he's really good. But yeah, there's a massive step up in competition for him there. So I think he benefits of sorts if you're going from a ranking standpoint, Nico does, that is, from just a lot of question marks around the rest of the league. But when you give me the same offensive system, head coach and play caller, and a quarterback who's, played an entire season already as a starter, I like your chances to take that step forward. But, even Arch Manning at Texas, it's like, I know what the potential is, but Nico's proven more than Arch has at this point in time. Arch might have the same ceiling, but like he hasn't proven anything yet.
You lead me into my next question. Like I was, let's not forget Nico was the starting quarterback for a team that won 10 regular season games and went to the college football playoffs. Yeah, 100%.
And nobody else can say that. I mean, Nussmeier, LSU was 8-4 last year, and I thought Nussmeier was really good and not always the problem for the Tigers there. So like he's my clear-cut number one because I'm a big fan of his. But like outside of that, got questions everywhere I look.
There's a whole lot of questions. I would have Sellers too. I would have Nico in my top 5. But I'm seeing these rankings where Diego Pavia is ahead of Nico, or the Arch is ahead of Nico. Like Arch is nothing but potential.
Diego Pavia is the father of the state of Alabama, so at least
true. He's a guy that I want to see play college football for 20 years. I mean, I love the story and all that, but like from I'm going to take this quarterback or this quarterback. I mean, like, what are we even thinking here? It's no contest. I want to relay all that into Arch. We kind of touched on it. Potential's there. He looked good in spurts last year in the roles that he played. I'm seeing Arch, top 3 quarterback Heisman odds, and kind of getting the Nico effect from last year. Top 3 quarterback Heisman odds, or number 2 quarterback in the SEC. It's like, dude hasn't proven a thing yet. But from what you've seen from Arch Manning, how good do you think he can be, and where do you think that he kind of stacks up against Nico, who he and Nico were 1-2 in that quarterback class?
Yeah, I think Arch Manning can win the Heisman Trophy. I don't know that he does that this year. Sark is a good offensive play caller and has plenty of creativity that'll make it easy for him in certain ways with, play calls that they have and, the way they utilize a screen game and all that sort of stuff. And Arch is, a really talented guy. But let's not forget, Texas's season got extended to the college football playoff semifinal because of a 4th and 13 where Quinn Ewers showed his veteran moxie to make a big play. Where he saw, they're not going to back out of this blitz. Let's switch into a max protection, give my guy one-on-one, and I know where I'm going with the football, gives an on-time, on-target throw to a future NFL wideout in Matthew Golden. Does Arch Manning have those sorts of things? Is he ready for that? I mean, he's been sitting for 2 years, so hey, maybe he does. But there is still a learning curve. No matter how long you sit, you're always better in your second or third season with those little things and the details. And Nico has a head start on Arch in that regard. So between the two, I don't know that I like either one to be a Heisman finalist this year, just because I need to see what Tennessee is able to put together with their receiving core and see how the whole team comes together and what the season will end up looking like. But for Arch, I just question, is he ready to step in and just boom take over college football, or is he going to have highs and lows, kind of like DJ Lagway this past year at Florida, a guy who I think I should have mentioned by now in this discussion, because he's someone who I'd probably slide ahead of Nico just barely in the SEC quarterback rankings, because that was a tough situation that Florida had last year. They were able to navigate it pretty well, and he's also a former 5-star recruit and a mega talent.
Yeah, I completely forgot about him too, which is funny because we talk quarterbacks on the show all the time. My one thing about DJ, who I think is a great talent, I think he's got turnover issues. He's got 11 touchdowns, 9 picks last year.
Yeah.
You need to focus on that in his sophomore year, and I'm sure that he will. Got to get you out the door. I know you got to go teach a class, Mr. Professor. But Spencer, where can we find all of your work on Locked On College Football every single day?
YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts, Locked On Ducks as well. If you're curious what's going on with Oregon, check that out wherever you're listening to or watching this show. And I'm on Twitter at @SMcLaughlinCFB if you want to tell me that
The Duck can pull the truck, baby. Go support it. Spencer, appreciate you, man.
Yeah, anytime.
Awesome stuff, as always, from my guest, Spencer McLaughlin, Locked On College Football, Austin Price, my colleague, VolQuest.com, and, of course, had a great conversation with you guys. Had a great talk and a great segment about the top 5, in my opinion, returners for Tennessee entering spring practice. It's set to get going tomorrow morning. How about that? Tomorrow morning. Really, really, really looking forward to that. Getting some notes and some news and, what's going on, who's making, waves and who's impressing day one, all that and more as we continue on here with spring practice. Appreciate you guys for being here, making Locked On Vols a part of your morning routine. Tell your friends, tell your Tennessee fan in your life, all that and more. Anywhere you get your podcast, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Download these episodes on Apple Podcasts. You got Apple Podcasts and wherever you get your podcast. Spotify. I don't know why I couldn't think of Spotify, but all that and more. This is Locked On Vols. Thank you guys so much. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday, and same time, same place. Let's do it again tomorrow. This is Locked On Vols.